If you had to pick the most irreplaceable Longhorn player on this team in 2024, who would it be and why?
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Remember, terms apply. On today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, over the first two segments, the 10 most important Longhorns in 2024 for me are irreplaceable, indispensable, whatever adjective you want to use. Over the first two segments, the 10 most irreplaceable, indispensable, important Longhorns heading into the 2024 season for me, right? And then in the last segment, CDC, our athletic director, gets his flowers. He was recently named the Sports Business Journal's Athletic Director of the Year. Definitely had a dominant 2023-2024 athletic season at the University of Texas. Really, he's been outstanding since he arrived on campus in 2017. So we do give CDC his flowers as we head into Memorial Day weekend. Hope everybody is safe and fun and has a good time this weekend, whether you're in Houston and still dealing with adverse effects or wherever. You know, we don't get a lot of these, or the Mondays off, that for some people 4-day weekend. So like I said, hope you enjoy it. Hope you get out and do something and be safe and have fun while you're doing it. All right. All of that on Locked On Longhorns. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I was on Horns 24/7 earlier in the week. I think this came out like Monday, Tuesday-ish. But I ended up doing the crossover episode with Drake. And so I was going to save this, till Friday. But they were doing an episode, or not an episode, but they did an article on horns247.com talking about, the most important or most irreplaceable Longhorn heading into the 2024 season. And they kind of did like a panel or a round table. I think it was 3 or 4 people that answered it. But they all gave one answer, right? And they kind of like started it with the caveat that they didn't want to give the obvious answer, which was Quinn Ewers, right? And so they were more so going for like, I guess either a name outside of Quinn Ewers or the sexy pick, right? But I was thinking of it and I'm like, okay, if I tried to do that on the podcast, who would be the sexy pick, right? Like sometimes there's just a right and wrong answer, right? And so to me, it made more sense to just do a top 10. That way you include the players you should include in this exercise while also, thinking and saying, okay, ranking 1 through 10, these are the players that we can't necessarily afford to lose, right? Because I don't think we can afford to lose any of the 10, right, that I'm about to express on this list. But I think obviously, there's going to be different levels of crisis, right? Or different levels of concern if you lose, maybe a Quinn Ewers compared to a Jake Majors, who, spoiler alert, is on my list. So, like I said, it made sense for me to, instead of trying to pick the one player on this super talented national championship contending football team that we couldn't afford to lose, made more sense for me to do a top 10 and just kind of ranking them in order of super crisis to we should be all right, but damn, he's still a really good player. So number one for me, and I think it's, pretty obvious. I think this should be the consensus answer among Longhorn fans is Quinn Ewers, right? Like that's the most important player, the one player. I wouldn't say the one player, but I think number one on this list, right, in terms of the most important player that you cannot afford to lose in the 2024 season. And I know that we've branded the quarterback room as the best in the country. I know that we have an all-world quarterback prospect behind Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning. So some people would say, oh, okay, well, we'll be fine if Quinn Ewers gets hurt. I think that's a little ambitious, right? One, Arch Manning is still a quarterback prospect, right? We've seen him come in and I think throw 6 passes, right, against a demoralized Texas Tech team at that point, right? And so there's not much you can take from that, even though he did look good. And then obviously he performed super well in the spring game, a couple of months ago, but it's the spring game, right? We have not seen him in live action or anything that means anything on the field for the University of Texas just yet. And I think Arch Manning is going to be a really good quarterback, right? I think he's all world, but to say that he could step in and beat Quinn Ewers right now, I think that's pretty unfair to Quinn Ewers. When you look at it, Quinn Ewers right now is a consensus top 3 quarterback in college football. He had an amazing season last year, a season that was, giving him Heisman buzz before we lost to Oklahoma. And then he missed 2 games due to injury. And Then he came back, broke records, right, in the Big 12 championship game, and, was very close to getting us to the national championship game last year. And you would expect Quinn Ewers to be better this season, even though he lost his 4 top pass catchers. We brought in some really good receivers to the 40 acres. He has some really good options to throw the ball to. So I think when you look at it, Texas' ceiling as being a conference championship contender in the SEC and the national championship contender in college football is based on the fact that Quinn Ewers is at center, right? I do think Arch Manning can do a great job eventually, but in terms of 2024, Texas' best bet, right, to reach their potential and reach their ceiling is with Quinn Ewers at quarterback, right? Arch Manning this year is expecting to be the backup, right? When Hudson Card came in an Alabama game, he was not expecting that. When Malik Murphy came in against the University of Houston, he was not expecting that, right? Arch Manning is not approaching this season to be a starting quarterback, right? And so if he had to come in, there would likely be some growing pains. And so Quinn Ewers, regardless of what you think about him, right? Regardless of what you think about Arch Manning, our best chance to win this year is with a veteran, experienced third-year quarterback in the SEC. It's not just about how long he's been playing football. He's been playing it at a really high level going back to last season. Like I said, Quinn Ewers is the most important player on this football team at the most important position. Then I'm going to Kelvin Banks, right? If we talk about Kelvin Banks as arguably the best offensive lineman in college football, I always talk about how quarterback, left tackle or right tackle, I guess if the quarterback is left-handed, and then edge rusher are the 3 most important positions in football. We talk about Kelvin Banks, who has a 98.6% pass rush win rate, which means he rarely ever loses in pass sets. Can be a little better in terms of run blocking, but you pay your left tackle to keep your quarterback upright. And we've seen at times that Quinn Ewers can struggle with pressure, right? And so for Quinn Ewers to have his best year, it would make sense to have the best blocking in terms of his blind side, right? That's one side that he doesn't have to worry about because Kelvin Banks is over there, right? And so if he's a top 10 pick potentially in next year's draft, if we're looking at him as arguably the best offensive lineman in the country, right? And if left tackle for a right-handed quarterback is one of the 3 most important positions in college football, then I would think that Kelvin Banks is the second most important or unreplaceable player on the team. We've talked about, Trevor Goosby looking good behind him in the spring, but that's just the spring. Brandon Baker, all the pedigree in the world, a 5-star coming out of Mater Dei, but he's a true freshman, right? I don't believe there's anybody on the bench right now that you could put in that could give you even 85% of Kelvin Banks' production, because we're talking about, like I said, a future franchise left tackle that'll be taken in the top 10, top 15 of the NFL draft. We recruited the offensive line very well. I think we have some very talented players in that room. We don't have another Kelvin Banks in that room, right? And so he would be the second most irreplaceable player on my list. 1, because of just what he does, period. But 2, he protects Quinn Ewers' blind side. He means so much to Quinn Ewers' confidence in terms of being able to go out there and play quarterback without worrying about getting hit. You know what I mean? And so he's just so important to this football team, one of the best players in the country. On the list I did earlier in the week of the top 100 players, they had him at number 3 overall, right? Number 3 overall. So he's definitely one of the most irreplaceable players on this Texas football team this season. Number 3, I got Anthony Hill, right? I've said it before. I just think Anthony Hill is all world. Almost maybe underrated at this point, right? We just saw a list of the top 100 players in college football, and Anthony Hill wasn't on it. And I think that's kind of crazy, right? But I get it. He's only, 1 year sample size. But to me, he jumped off the screen early, right? It's as soon as that second game with 2 sacks against Alabama, right? Second game ever in college, a la Kelvin Banks. And when you look at it, just what he brings to the linebacker position, can play all 3 linebacker positions, can blitz, really effectively. We saw that last year. I think can cover in the middle. He just can do everything, right? It's a leader, whether it's by example or raw guys want to follow him. That's the kind of middle linebacker that you want to go to war with. And I think last year, our defensive line took a lot of pressure off of our linebackers, right? When you have 2 All-Americans at defensive tackle, when you have good, maybe it wasn't great, but when you have good edge play, right, especially in terms of stopping the run, the 3rd best run defense in the country, that takes a lot of pressure on the linebackers in the second line, right, off the linebackers in the second line, because how many running backs or how many players actually got past T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, right? This year, if we expect the defensive tackle room to decrease in terms of production, just the defensive line as a whole, maybe. I don't expect us to have the 3rd best run defense in the country this year again after losing T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. I think that puts more importance. I don't want to say pressure, but puts more importance on your linebackers, right? I think Anthony Hill is going to be in a more important role this season than Jalen Ford was last year, because last year Jalen Ford had T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy directly in front of him to kind of, break up a lot of that traffic. So I think that Anthony Hill this year, our linebackers are going to be more important because we're relying less on our defensive line as we did last year when they were all world. And because of that, I think Anthony Hill is going to make a lot of plays, going to have to make a lot of plays and really pick up his brothers in front of him on that defensive line. And I'm not saying the defensive line is going to be trash or anything like that. Like, of course not, right? But I'm saying T'Vondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, they take pressure off of linebackers. I think this year our linebackers are going to have to take pressure off the defensive line. Next most irreplaceable player is Alfred Collins, right? Talking about that defensive line. When we look at the defensive tackle room, I think that's all the room that we're looking at with a little bit of anxiety right now. That's the room that we're going to be looking at closely into the season and seeing how they play, right? Because like I said, you're replacing T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. So that's a big wild card right now, right? And we don't have a lot in the room, right? Steve Sarkisian has been screaming that all offseason. First, it was we only have about 3 players we can trust. Then it was about 4, but either way, right? It doesn't feel like we have the 5, 6 players in that room that Steve Sarkisian, Pete Kwiatkowski, and the rest of the staff are accustomed to, right? When you've had players like Mora Ojimo, Keandre Coburn, Byron Murphy, T'Vondre Sweat, et cetera, et cetera. But Alfred Collins is somebody that Steve Sarkisian has really praised throughout the offseason in terms of just coming in with the right mindset and being a defensive tackle that this team can rely on. And also he's a physical freak at that position, right? In terms of just pass rush ability, height, size, 6'5", 321. But he has a different type of frame than you're used to seeing in terms of defensive tackles. He has all of the ability and the physical ability in the world to be dominant, right? It's just that inconsistency that we've seen thus far. But he can have a Byron Murphy, T'Vondre Sweat level season just based off of his physical attributes, right? And his talent level, right? If he puts it all together, he could have that type of season. So I think you can't afford to lose him because 1, he could have an elite season at that defensive tackle position. But 2, I don't think there's enough depth in that room for you to lose a player like Alfred Collins and still expect to have plus production from your defensive tackle room, right? We're already bare in that room, and I think it's going to take an exceptional season from Alfred Collins to match the production that we had last year. Either way, we cannot afford to lose big Alfred Collins in that defensive tackle room. And then Malik Muhammad, before we go to break, that's the last one, number 5. When I was reading that 24/7 Sports article, a couple of people had him as their number 1. I think there's a lot of talent in that cornerback room, but a lot of it's unproven really at the University of Texas. When you look at it, Kobe Black, Wardell Mack, Santana Wilson, true freshmen, right? Gavin Holmes said to have a really good spring, but did not have a good season last year. That's projection. Javion Cole just came over from San Jose State. We have not seen him at the University of Texas just yet, right? Then you're talking about Jahdae Barron, who's going to be playing outside corner, right? More than he ever has at the University of Texas. That's an experiment. Jalen Gilbo has looked nice at the star position, right, at times, right, but he's been unable to stay healthy or been inconsistent at that position. And then you have Malik Muhammad on the other side, who was really your stalwart last year, right, and really your stalwart going into the season. There's a lot of talent in that room, but Malik Muhammad, outside of Jahdae Barron, is probably your most, established corner in that room and your most consistent corner based on what he did last year. And you already know what position he's going to be playing in, right? There's a scenario where you have to move Jahdae Barron from outside corner back to the star. You know where Malik Muhammad is going to be in terms of that cornerback position. So I think that if you lose him, right, if you lose him to injury, I'm not going to wood for all of these players, but if you lost Malik Muhammad, I think that would create a musical chairs in the cornerback room that we just really don't want to deal with this season, right? I think we need Malik Muhammad to lock down his corner spot to have flexibility everywhere else, especially when you're experimenting with guys at different positions. If we lose Malik Muhammad, like I said, that sets off a musical chairs in that room that none of us want to see. All right, quick word from our sponsors, and then I get into 6 through 10, the most important players or most irreplaceable players on this Longhorns football team heading into 2024. I didn't mean to do that. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by Gametime, your favorite ticketing app. Gametime has priority last-minute deals, saving up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. I can't tell you how many Astros games I've bought the tickets for an hour or 2 hours away from first pitch, saving a ton of money. Flash deals. You save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. Zone deals. Save even more when you choose a section and let Gametime choose the seats. All-in price, and toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Seat views, get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and the lowest price guarantee or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets or whatever sport it is with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, getting into the next most important player on my list, and he's really low, right? Because I've always come on here with the philosophy of quarterback, left tackle, edge rusher, right? But I think the reason that I have him down at number 6, and I think you can guess at this point is Trey Moore, is because, one, we haven't seen him yet at the University of Texas. He is taking that step up in production. I think he'll be fine. 22 and a half sacks over the last 2 years. UTSA is not a snuff program, right? And they're not in a snuff conference. It's just not the Big 12 or, the SEC, which we'll be transitioning into. And so, we've yet to see what he can do at the University of Texas. And I always mention those 22 and a half sacks over the last 2 years. What I don't mention enough is the 17 and a half tackles for loss that he had last season as well. So really good in terms of just getting to whoever's in the backfield, right? The quarterback or the running back. But another reason that I have him down at number 6, right? Even though I think he's really good and, that's a premium position, right? We need better play from our edges this year if we want to reach a higher ceiling than we did in 2023. And that's why you bring a player like Trey Moore in. But another reason I have him down at number 6 is the rest of that room, right? You have the 2 starters from last season in that room, right? With Ethan Burke and Barron Sorrell. So if you had to trot them out there, I don't think you're in a bad position. Then you still have players, with depth with, Colton Vasek, Justice Finkley, who's been, a really good player for you. Colin Simmons, who's an all-world prospect who I think can step in right now and rush the passer at a high level. Tassili Akana and just some more bodies in that room. So obviously you don't want to lose Trey Moore for sure. I think he's the, potential superstar in that room right now until Colin Simmons is ready. And I think he's the player that increases the ceiling of that room, right? I think last year we saw that Ethan Burke and Barron Sorrell could be really good, right? But I think Trey Moore can be great to elite, and I think eventually Colin Simmons could be great to elite. So he still makes my top 10. Like I said, I think we have really good players behind him, and we've yet to see any of his production at the University of Texas. That's why he's number 6 on my list. Number 7 is Jaden Blue, and this is probably a little high, right? Especially with him playing the running back position, especially with most fans dubbing the University of Texas running back U, and I certainly agree with that, especially in recent memory. When you look at it, there are a lot of talented players in the room, right? If you exclude Jaden Blue, you still have a Cedric Baxter, who is a 5-star. You still have a Trey Wisner, who's looked really good at times. I guess the only time he really ran the ball was against Texas Tech. But you know what he does on special teams? He's a fan favorite. He did look good in that game, though, in terms of running the ball, regardless of the context or the situation. You did lose Savion Red, but I think Jared Gibson and Christian Clark are exciting players as true freshmen, right? But when I look at it, I think that there's nobody else in that room that can do what Jaden Blue can do, right? You're talking about a player that reached a max speed last year of 22.7 miles per hour. That's fast, right? Like if I need to put that in perspective for anybody, that's fast, right? And I don't think anybody else in that room can really come close to 22.7 miles per hour. Like when we look at that room, I think Cedric Baxter is more power, right? More ground and pound power, right? I think when you look at Jared Gibson, same thing, right? More ground and pound power. Christian Clark, I think, provides a little bit more versatility, but he's a big back, right? He's not the home run waiting to happen that Jaden Blue is, right? I seriously think that every time you give Jaden Blue the ball, just in terms of his speed, his agility, his quickness, his ability to make you miss, his electricity, right? Like it just looks like I'm watching, you say thunder and lightning. Like it literally just looks like I'm watching lightning when I'm watching Jaden Blue. He's just so good. He is so good, right? Like, he's just so good. So I know I have him a little bit high at number 7. I know running backs have been devalued in recent years, and I know that we have crazy talent in that room. So I probably have Jaden Blue a little too high. I'll admit that. But, man, he is just good to me. And like I said, to me, he's the home run hitter in that room. He's the one player in that room that is a threat to hit their head on the goalpost every time you put the ball in their hands. And with what you have at the tight end position and with what you have at the wide receiver position, to have to worry about a running back who undoubtedly runs a 4.32 or better, good luck. I really think Jaden Blue, at least right now, is the best running back in that room. And that's no disrespect to Cedric Baxter. That's just all the respect in the world to Jaden Blue. And, man, I think that the possibilities with him in this offense this year are limitless. I'm a huge Jaden Blue fan. I'm really high, like on Jaden Blue, like giraffe neck high on Jaden Blue. And, I think this is his breakout season for sure. Next is Jake Majors. All right. The reason I have Jake Majors is because we've been trying to replace him for 2 years and we couldn't. Right. So obviously he has to be on a list of the top 10 most irreplaceable players on this Texas football team because we've seen it bread and butter. Right. We've seen it You know what I mean? Right before our eyes. But seriously, when you look at it, I think we have some players that could step in and maybe learn that position. But you saw firsthand in the Oklahoma game last year, that offensive line was different when Jake Majors went down, right? He's the quarterback of that offensive line. He is one of the most experienced and best centers in the country. And that means something, right? That really means something to your offensive line. And so I think Jake Majors in this run that we've had at the University of Texas probably is the most underrated player on the football team, right? Because he means so much to Quinn Ewers and the communication on that offensive line, even more than Kelvin Banks, who was the best player on that offensive line. And when you look at what's behind him, yeah, Cole Hudson has got some reps at center. Yeah, some players have cross-trained at center. But we have a bunch of guards behind him that would have to step in and play the center position, right? Jake Majors is the one true center that we have on campus. And when we lost him last year, like I said, that offensive line was not the same in the Oklahoma game. So Jake Majors was number 85 on the top 100 players list in college football. I thought that was great praise. I thought that was a hell of a selection. I can't remember the name of the dude that made the list, but I thought that was a hell of a selection, putting Jake Majors number 85 on the list. So I'm going to give him some flowers and put him number 8 on my most irreplaceable list of Texas players this season. Number 9, Isaiah Bond, maybe a little low for Isaiah Bond. Maybe I could have got away with switching Isaiah Bond and Jaden Blue, something I'll maybe think about for the rest of the weekend. But nonetheless, I think when you look at it, same thing, Isaiah Bond, we have not seen that production yet at the University of Texas, has yet to reach 700 yards in a season, even though we all expect this to be the breakout. But I still think he's on the top 10 list of most irreplaceable players this season, right? Because it's almost like if you would have lost Xavier Worthy. Like, yeah, you still have Adonai Mitchell, Jordan Whittington, and Jatavius Sanders to throw the ball to. But to me, Xavier Worthy brought a different skill set or superpower to this football team that defenses had to account for. And I think that's the same thing with Isaiah Bond. Now, you do have players like Matthew Golden, a track athlete who can get down the field in a hurry, right? Silas Bolden, all 5'8" of them can get down the field in a hurry, right? DeAndre Moore, Jonte Cook, like all of these players are deep threats. But to me, Isaiah Bond is the one with the groundbreaking speed, right? He's the one where we absolutely cannot lose him on the football field. Now, Texas has so many good players. Inevitably, you're going to lose them at some point. But Isaiah Bond is the one that you cannot let get past your last line of defense, because if you do, he's hitting his head on the goalpost. So I just think in a way, Ryan, he has that Xavier Worthy type impact on the room where, yeah, the entire room is crazy talented. But Isaiah Bond, to me, can do things in that room that nobody else can do, a la Xavier Worthy, a la Jaden Blue, why he was number 7 on my list. But the reason that Isaiah Bond is number 9 is what he has in that room, right? When you talk about Texas being able to go 6 deep at the wide receiver position and being A-OK with Ryan Wingo, Jonte Cook, DeAndre Moore, Silas Bolden, and Matthew Golden, that kind of decreases Isaiah Bond's importance a little bit. If he went out, I think we would still be fine at the wide receiver position, but I think our ceiling is higher because he can do things in that room that nobody else can, and that's why he made the list at number 9 on my top 10 list. And then number 10 is Arch Manning. I struggled with this one because I thought about going with the safety position, maybe going with another corner, maybe going with the tight end, because Steve Sarkisian has said it's the second most important position on his offense. But I didn't think who we could lose in the tight end room and just not be okay over, right? Gunnar Helm, Amari Niblack. Like, I think we would still be fine, right? Even though I think Gunnar Helm is a hell of a player, he's going to have a good season. And so I went back to the quarterback position, right? And this is why, with Arch Manning, a few reasons. One, Quinn Ewers for 3 straight years as a starting quarterback. His last year at South Lake Carroll and 2 years at the University of Texas. He has missed time due to injury, right? We weren't expecting Hudson Card to come in the Alabama game, but he did, right? We weren't expecting Malik Murphy to come in the Houston game, but he did, right? So 3 years of data would tell us that Arch Manning at some point is going to come in and play this year. I'm going to knock on wood because I don't want Quinn to get hurt. And we know Arch is going to come in as, hopefully a backup when we blow out some teams, right? But like I said, 3 straight years tells us that Quinn Ewers has been unable to finish the season. So we at least have to broach the possibility, right, that Arch Manning could be our starting quarterback at some point this year, right? If Arch Manning even starts one game, right, and he's one of the 10 most important players on this football team this season, because when you look at it, we don't make the Big 12 championship game or the college football playoff if Malik Murphy doesn't go 2-0, right? Last season. The year before, a lot of people say we win that Alabama game if Quinn Ewers stays in. A lot of people, I'm not sure if you can say that because it wasn't Hudson Card's fault we lost, but nonetheless, a lot of people feel like we win that Texas Tech game if Quinn Ewers stays in. Now, I think the back half of the season Quinn had kind of dispels all of those narratives, but anyway, those narratives were out, right? You can make the argument, all right, I'm not sure how true it is, but you can make the argument that Texas has a different 2022 season if Quinn Ewers never gets hurt, right? Like, they can reach a different bowl, maybe even make the conference championship game. Who knows, right? If Quinn Ewers does not get hurt. So that's why, right, with 3 years of data saying Quinn Ewers has gotten hurt, you need Arch Manning, right, to be ready to come in and potentially play at a high level, right? Then when you look at it, we're always one hit away from Arch Manning being our starter, right? At any point this season, from the first snap taken against Colorado State, we are one hit away from Arch Manning being our starting quarterback, right? So he's definitely one of the 10 most important players on the team if you look at it from that sense, right? And then I'm going to add another layer to that. Assuming that Arch Manning is going to throw at least one pass this year, right? Like, even if Quinn Ewers never gets hurt, Arch Manning's still going to throw a good amount of passes because I believe we're going to blow out at least 4 teams this season, at least 4, right? When Arch Manning is playing, we're now one hit away from Trey Owens, right? Because if Arch Manning goes out, we are one hit away from a true freshman in Trey Owens being our starting quarterback in a year where we feel like we can win the SEC and the national championship. And as much as I love Trey Owens, as much as you love Trey Owens, that would be no bueno for this football team. So Quinn Ewers, the most important player on this football team. But then I got Arch Manning at number 10 because we're always one hit away from him being our starter. And then we could potentially be one hit away from a true freshman in Trey Owens being our starting quarterback in one of our most important seasons in program history. Quick word from our sponsors, and then we give CDC our flowers as we get out of here on Memorial Day weekend. 26 minutes in already. Damn, I've been talking. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com to look at odds. Oh, sorry, FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I started reading what I was supposed to read internally out loud. I apologize for that, but it's Friday. Who's even listening 27 minutes into the show? A lot of y'all. I appreciate that. So when we look at it, CDC named Sports Business Journal's Athletic Director of the Year. Admittedly, I don't know how prestigious is that. I mean, I know it's prestigious. He gets a trophy, right? It's going to be in his house for the rest of eternity. But, like in college football, there's like different awards, right? And so it's like you could win, well, not even like that, but okay, so like Rodney Terry in 2022, he won Coach of the Year, right? But he wasn't like the AP Coach of the Year. It was like a couple different outlets gave him Coach of the Year. So I don't know if this is, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I don't know if this is the top Athletic Director of the Year award, like if this is the one everyone is striving for, or if this is just kind of like a sub award. But nonetheless, Sports Business Journal's Athletic Director of the Year. Shout out to CDC. He's been amazing this year. He's been amazing since 2017. And luckily for you, I have the numbers to quantify how amazing CDC has been since he arrived on campus. In the 2023-2024 athletic year, which is still going on, by the way, the Texas Longhorns won 15 conference championships, while the rest of the Big 12 combined for 14. So when somebody tells you that Texas didn't fare well in the Big 12, they're probably talking about football, and they're probably right. Right? But we have more athletic programs at the University of Texas than football, and we absolutely have dominated the Big 12, right? 15 conference championships this athletic year, 14 for the rest of the conference. Volleyball won the national championship. Women's swimming and men's tennis were runner-ups. Football made the Final Four or college football playoffs. Women's basketball made the Elite Eight. This is all this season, right? And I'm going to be that guy, right? I'm definitely going to be that guy. Rodney Terry's team and the basketball team made the Elite Eight last season as well, right? Even though it's not included in this metric. Soccer and women's tennis made the round of 16, as well as softball, who has a chance to advance to the College World Series this weekend. And if once, right, the baseball team is selected to a regional, all 19 eligible Texas athletic programs will have made the postseason in the 2023-2024 athletic year. And since CDC took over in 2017, Texas has won 12 championships, 73 conference titles, and 46 top 5 finishes. Once again, since 2017, Texas has 12 championships, 73 conference championships, and 46 top 5 finishes under CDC, one of the nicest people in the world, and obviously one of the best in the world at his job. Always willing to talk to fans, always willing to take suggestions from fans. He's responded to my tweets before, and I barely even tweet. Right? So he's just accessible, and he's just meant a great deal to the University of Texas athletic programs. One of the biggest reasons we can walk around and really rep this university with pride. We always have, right? But it means a little bit more now because we're back up. And one of the biggest reasons for that is CDC. So definitely want to give him his flowers. Once again, I hope everybody is safe and has fun this Memorial Day weekend. Try to relax and unwind and let all the stress and pressure go. Hook 'em. Peace.